The Supreme Court has upheld Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors, including everything from transition surgery to puberty blockers and hormone therapy. Colorado law protects gender-affirming care, but that medical care is already harder to access here. Inside Out Youth Services in Colorado Springs says access to gender-affirming care for minors has been shrinking over the past year, and outside of Denver, it's hard to find at all. So joining me this morning to discuss this ruling is our 9 News legal expert, Whitney Traylor. Whitney, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Let's start with the ruling itself.
Yeah.
What is the legal basis for the court upholding the Tennessee law?
Yeah, so really the law was challenged based on an equal protection claim under the 14th Amendment, and saying that, hey, this law treats us differently based on our gender. And so they came back, the court came back with a 6-3 and decided no, that this ban was constitutional, and that it upheld the standard that the court looked at. And one of the big issues was what standard of review should the court use? Because when the court determines constitutionality of a law, it applies a certain standard. And so here the question was, should it be minimal scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny? And so, and what that means is the level of review that the court is going to impose on it. And the court chose to impose a lower rational basis test, which laws are almost always upheld. And all it has to say is that the Tennessee legislature had a legitimate government interest, and their government interest was, hey, young people are hating the sex that they're born with, and we want to discourage it. That was their justification.
No, interesting. No, I was going to say, we heard a lot of opinions yesterday, of course, from the court, some of them concurring, some of them dissenting, some of them very strongly worded. Tell us about those.
Yeah, and it was 6-3. It was a 6-3 decision, and a concurring decision is when a justice agrees with the outcome of the case, but for a different reason.
Right.
A dissenting opinion is obviously someone who disagrees, and so there were a number of concurring opinions that were just as long as the actual opinion written by Justice Roberts, and then, of course, there were 3 dissents. And the dissent by Sotomayor was very strong, and she said, basically, look, court, we didn't even impose a judicial review. We basically said, hey, it's up to the Tennessee legislature, and essentially kicked the can. And she was quite strong in her dissent. So just like the nation, the court was divided as well.
Right. Now, does this decision resolve the big debate that we've heard of over medical care for transgender youth?
I don't think it resolves it, because just like most cases that go to the Supreme Court, we get a resolution. What the Supreme Court says is binding on the rest of the country. But then, of course, each case that comes up might have a slightly different fact. And so they'll argue why this case should apply or shouldn't apply. So I think what we're going to see, I mean, essentially what they said was this Tennessee law is upheld, and so the states can do these kind of laws. There's about 24 other states other than Tennessee that have similar type laws. And so they're saying, look, states, you can go forward with that. So now what you're going to see is more litigation, because now as they start to impose these, transgender youth and others, doctors and everybody are going to say, hey, this violates my rights, this violates my constitutional right, and challenge it. And so this issue will come before the Supreme Court again, for sure. As
you mentioned, there are 24 states that have it at the state level. Of course, this was a federal ruling. What about in Colorado specifically? What do we have?
So Colorado has a number of protections. In fact, there was just a law that was passed in April or May. There was Jude's law. There was a number of different laws related to transgender youth and giving them those protections. So here in Colorado, I think this may not have as major of an impact, but you may see now the legislature picking up even more legislation as it relates to certain of these medical treatments for some of these.
When you say that, do you mean kind of to enforce protections, or
to actually, I think, impose more protections? And there already are protections now in terms of gender identity and things like that, and what the teachers can and can't do in school. But I think you'll see even more protections from this legislature, just seeing how far left-leaning it is.
Of course, we did see that with the Colorado legislature after several other major rulings from the Supreme Court, so I think you're spot on with that. Whitney, thank you so much for helping us understand that.